Hi, everyone. Welcome to the History of New Media Art. I'm your instructor, Jacqueline Gleisner. Today, we will be talking about interactive art installations. Now, there are two aspects of interaction that I want you to consider today: the interaction or movement of the artwork itself, as well as the viewer's participation in the work. As you listen and watch this presentation, also consider how the expectations of viewers have changed over time. When you go to an art museum, how often are interactive media embedded into the experience in some way? If you think back on your more recent viewing experiences of contemporary art, you'll start to notice that many of the exhibitions involve interactive media of some sort or another. In the last presentation, we introduced the topic of net art, focusing on several projects that use the World Wide Web as their platform. One of the early examples that we explored was Brandon, a 1993 exhibition at the now defunct Guggenheim Soho site in New York City. Xu Liacheng's 1998 work was a multifaceted web project that used the internet as a platform to communicate Brandon Teena's real-life tragic story. These days, the conversation on transgender rights is very much a part of our culture, but keep in mind that this exhibition was made during a time when that was not necessarily the case. The year after this exhibition, the subject of Chang's project was made into a feature-length film starring Hilary Swank called Boys Don't Cry. This shows how artists pick up on some of the more relevant aspects of our culture as they are shifting, sometimes in advance of more mainstream forms of entertainment like feature-length films. Today, we are examining interactive art installations, and we are going to see several examples of interactive art experiences. But keep in mind, these are but a small handful. Many, if not most, contemporary art exhibitions embrace the idea of implicating the viewer in some way. And we know that this is not a new idea. Duchamp's idea was that a viewer would complete the work of art, and among many contemporary artists, this notion has taken on new meanings. His rotary plates from 1920 is a very early example of an interactive artwork, and it also demonstrates how much more interactive contemporary examples have become. Fluxus happenings during the 1960s also demanded viewer participation. Mirror from 1963 by Chieko Shiomi provided these instructions. Stand on the sandy beach with your back to the sea. Hold a mirror in front of your face and look into it. Step back to the sea and enter the water. If you've never attempted to enact one of these scripts, I challenge you to do so. Here's another one by Yoko Ono for her work Touch Piece for a Group of People, with its very straightforward directions to touch each other. We've returned to the work of Marcel Duchamp many times in this course. His idea of the ready-made prefigured many instances of new media art that involve appropriation. Another current with Duchamp's work was the idea of participation, and this work from 1920 required a viewer to interact with it. Made with the help of Man Ray, this rotating device provides a very early example of interactive art because it was the responsibility of the viewer to engage with this piece and become an active participant. A viewer needed to turn on the device and then stand 1 meter from it. Before we dive into more current examples, let's use these words by the curator, writer, editor, and educator Timothy Drucker as a way of framing this lecture. If images are to become increasingly experiential, then a theory of representation must be evolved to account for the transaction provoked by the viewer. We see and experience images everywhere. As images become more experiential, the viewer becomes more involved in the process of seeing the work in a more immersive way. This slide lists the examples we are going to look at during today's lecture. But remember, this is a very small slice of these types of exhibitions or works or artists. We'll start with Genetic Images by Carl Sims. This work from 1993 was shown at the Pompidou in Paris in 1995. Sims is a graduate of MIT, and he spent several years creating genetic images, which was inspired by Darwin's theory of natural selection. Genetic images seem to develop within their own environment inside of the computer. You can see from the installation view of this exhibition that there were multiple computer screens that viewers used to engage with the work. The viewer chose a sample image and then it randomly changed in color, texture, shape, and other parameters occur, yielding a new mutation of the creature. Viewers could also create their own artificial light forms that grew inside of the computer. This slide shows Leo Villarreal's work, Here Comes the Sun, from 2004. This work was shown at the El Paso Museum of Art in the exhibition Leo Villarreal Early Light in 2019. Villarreal was raised on both sides of the El Paso Juarez border, and he rose to fame with his large-scale, site-specific public works. He began to experiment with light, sound, and video as an undergraduate at Yale University here in New Haven. Then at the Tisch School for the Arts at New York University, he learned programming languages. Following in the trajectory of light artists like Dan Flavin and James Turrell, Villarreal's works often use LED lights that have been programmed in specific ways to activate the space. This work is one of his wall-bound sculptures that uses custom software. A digital coding system designed by the artist creates millions of different combinations. Here's another example of one of Villarreal's works. This one is called Multiverse, and it's a public and permanent installation that lives in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. As visitors pass through the concourse walkway between the east and west buildings, Villarreal's work twinkles in unpredictable ways. The programming instructs the lights when to turn on, but Villarreal also embedded an element of chance. This means that viewers will most likely not be able to understand or notice any patterns. There are approximately 41,000 computer-programmed LED nodes in this 200-foot-long space. The project's development began in 2005, and then it was installed 3 years later between September and December in 2008. Fang Mengbo's work, Q4U, was shown at Hanart TZ Gallery in Hong Kong. This work is part of the artist's series of works based on the post-apocalyptic video game Quake. Fang began this series in 1999 with a 32-minute computer-generated film in which he inserted himself as the central character. This work was an interactive, internet-connected installation that included a real-time performance by the artist when he was present. In 2002, Fang created Q4U, shown here. He altered the open-source code of the game Quake 3 Arena and turned all the characters in the game into his own image. Desire of Codes by the Japanese artist Seiko Makami was designed to emulate the function of memory in our contemporary information-rich society. A vast array of robotic sensors responded to the presence of visitors inside the space, and on another wall, the video recordings from both the present and past were mixed, presenting a non-linear mashup of visual information. This work was exhibited at the Intercommunication Center in Tokyo in Japan in 2011. And to gather a greater understanding of how this work probed the nature of surveillance in relation to the human mind, please watch the video linked on this page. And finally, Beijing-based artists Sun Yuan and Pen Yu created Can't Help Myself for an exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum in 2016. This large-scale installation featured a massive robotic arm that continuously swept up a viscous, blood-like liquid from the floor inside of an enclosed space. The work was also included in the 2019 Venice Biennale titled, May You Live in Interesting Times. The persistent motion of the arm and its inability to gather up all of the blood-like liquid created a feeling of futility and hopelessness. Please watch the video linked on this page in which the artists talk about how they came to art as well as their intentions for this extremely provocative work. That's it for this lecture. Next time we'll be talking about virtual reality and how artists are using this evolving technology in their works. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you all soon.